He was still breathing when the ropes pulled his limbs apart. If you're watching this, prepare yourself. This isn't just a story about a king. It's a lesson in cruelty, power, and how the same people who once bowed at your feet can one day cheer for your bones to break. Subscribe if you're ready for the darkest chapter in medieval history. He ruled with iron, not justice. The people called him the Black Crown behind closed doors, a king more feared than loved. His name had weight, not from honor, but from the blood behind it. Peasants vanished. Nobles knelt not out of loyalty, but survival. He executed whispers, taxed until families sold their last spoon. His court was filled with silence and trembling. But in the silence, rot was growing. He had no heir. Only enemies with patience. He trusted few, and they used that to get closer. One, his oldest advisor, once saved from execution by the king himself, now met in the shadows of the monastery, where voices didn't echo and loyalty didn't matter. The plan wasn't swift. It grew slowly, like mold in stone. Names added, messages hidden in wine barrels, townsmen sworn to death oaths. The king? He didn't see it. Why would he? Kings don't bleed until they do. One day the grain shipment was late, then another. Roads sabotaged, gold missing from the vault. He sent his tax riders, but they vanished. When a messenger returned, pale and shivering, he carried a cloth stained with the royal emblem, torn and burned. The first crack. Still the king laughed. In the throne room, he held court with a chalice of spiced wine and ordered a town of traitors to be erased from maps. A week later, that same town was empty. But so was the unit that burned it. They never returned. And then the envoy came. No army, no weapons, just one man, walking through the gates in daylight with nothing but a parchment in his hand. The guards let him pass, confused. The court fell silent as he approached the throne, and when he unrolled the message and read the first line, the king's hand froze on his goblet. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a list. 12 names. Each one belonged to someone the king had executed in the last 5 years. At the bottom, balance is due. The king crumpled the parchment in his fist, veins bulging at his temple. Find him, he growled. Find them all. But by dusk, the envoy was gone, vanished like smoke. And the guard who let him pass? Dead before morning, throat cut in his sleep. No sign of forced entry. The court whispered. By the end of the week, 3 villages refused the king's tax riders. A steward was hanged outside the city walls, not by criminals, but by former soldiers. Loyal men. Branded deserters now. His closest commander urged him to mobilize the royal army, but the king refused. "We are not at war," he said. "They are ants. I am the boot." But even ants can swarm. At court, tension spread like fire in dry hay. The nobles who once sat close to the throne now stood farther back, eyes darting, voices low. One baron left the city for family matters and never returned. Another sent word he'd been taken ill, but scouts reported his banner raised over a fortified manor. The king summoned them. None came. Then came the letter. Delivered not by courier, but tied to the tail of a slaughtered hawk, thrown through the window of the royal hall. The seal wasn't wax. It was a tooth. Human. The message was short. You ruled with fear. Now we answer in kind. The king didn't sleep that night. For the first time, he ordered double patrols. Torches burned at every corner of the fortress. But fear doesn't follow walls. It seeps inside. Servants stopped making eye contact. The kitchen boy vanished. A captain was found dead in the well. And still, no war banners were seen. No sieges. Just silence and absence. Then his treasury was breached, not with swords, with ledgers. Entire vaults emptied through forgery, bribes, vanished shipments. His gold, the spine of his rule, was leaking away. The master of coin confessed before dying in the stocks. We gave it to the cause. Which cause? The king demanded. But he already knew. The next morning, the city bells rang out, not for celebration, but alarm. In the East District, flames rose, not from enemies, but from within. His people. They were no longer afraid. Smoke choked the morning sky, as if the heavens themselves turned against him. From the eastern towers, the king could see black plumes curling like fingers over his city. His. Fire licked through markets, storehouses, and tax offices. Guards tried to contain it, but the crowd didn't scatter. They fought back. Not like an army, like people with nothing left to lose. The royal cavalry charged once, twice, and were swallowed. One rider returned, limp in the saddle, blood soaking his tabard. "They're not rebels," he gasped. "They're everyone." Inside the fortress, panic took root. The king summoned his generals. The largest army in the region, trained, armored, fed with coin and fear, now hesitated. Some captains murmured about retreat, waiting out the fires. Others simply didn't appear. Doors locked, rooms empty. Loyalty had become a whisper, not a promise. By nightfall, they came, not with siege engines or battering rams. They marched in silence through the same streets where his banners once flew. Thousands, peasants, smiths, deserters, women in cloaks with torches in hand. And at the front, a man with no weapon. Just the same parchment as before, held high in his fist. 12 names, no words. The message didn't change. The king ordered the gates shut, walls manned, archers ready, but his walls had cracks he never saw. Before midnight, the gatehouse fell, not to battle, but betrayal. The outer guard commander, once honored at the king's table, opened the rear passage to the rebels himself. "We do this not for vengeance," he told the stunned royal soldiers, but to end a nightmare. By morning, half the city was lost. Not one enemy commander had been identified. No battle lines, just wave after wave coming from inside the kingdom itself. The king fled to the citadel, his last wall. He stood in the tower, staring at the horizon, where smoke and daylight blurred together. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Who are they?" A servant nearby, one of the few left, replied without emotion, "Your people." And for the first time in his life, the king had no command to give. The citadel gates slammed shut behind him with a finality that felt like a coffin lid. Inside, the walls were high, thick, centuries old, built for siege. But outside, the chants had already begun. No horns, no drums, just voices, thousands of them. "Come down." The king paced the upper hall, his steps echoing. Only a handful of men remained, the ones too afraid to run. The chamberlain, pale and trembling. A guard captain who hadn't spoken since his brother was found hanging near the armory. 2 scribes, silent as stone. No food had been brought in. The stores had been emptied by fleeing servants. The wine in the king's goblet was bitter. He drank it anyway. That night, they tried to send a scout through the tunnels. He returned with no tongue. The second day, a fire broke out in the lower barracks. It wasn't sabotage. It was the cook's lantern, dropped from shaking hands. Flames ate through the supplies. Smoke poured through the stone grates. The king coughed until he bled, but refused to leave the throne room. The third day, the well went dry. The fourth, someone slipped poison into the king's bread, or tried to. He didn't eat it. The chamberlain did. He died gasping, clutching his stomach like it owed him something. On the 5th day, a voice rang out through the courtyard. It wasn't angry, it was calm. Send him out, and the rest of you may leave." The king stood at the window. Below, a platform had been raised. Not a scaffold, a table. Large, heavy, wet with something dark that soaked the wood. No noose, no axe, just ropes. No one moved. He turned to his remaining guard. "You'll hold," he rasped, "to the last breath." They didn't answer. By nightfall, they were gone. Only the king remained, walking barefoot across the empty throne room, the crown still on his head. He opened the chest near the altar, found the sword he once used to knight his first general. He held it in shaking hands. Not to fight, just to remember. Outside, the chanting grew louder. "Come down." They didn't drag him out. He walked. Barefoot, the blade still in his hand, though he made no move to lift it. The doors opened not to guards, but to silence. Not the silence of fear, the silence of certainty. The kind people wear when justice is no longer debated, only delivered. Stones scraped under his feet as he stepped into the light. The air outside stung, not with cold, but with judgment. Faces filled every space, rooftops, windows, walls, children on shoulders, elders on canes, merchants, beggars, blacksmiths, former soldiers. No distinction now, just witnesses. He looked up once. No banners, just the table. Thick wood, metal rings, leather straps, cracked and blackened. Buckets nearby, tools resting in cloth. No hooded figure, just the man from the parchment, standing at the edge of the platform. Still no weapon, no crown, just presence. "You were given 12 names," the man said. His voice didn't need to rise. The crowd carried it. The king's voice was dry. "They were traitors. They were your people." A pause. Wind passed through the square like breath through lungs. "Do you deny what you've done?" Silence. The man stepped forward. "Then by this city, by every name etched in the stone you cracked, you are found guilty." The crowd didn't cheer. It didn't need to. The words themselves held weight. A sentence spoken not with anger, but with finality. "You are not to die quickly," the man said. "No sword, no fire. You will die the way you ruled." In parts, the king didn't flinch. Not when they removed his cloak. Not when they cut away the royal crest from his chest. He stood until the ropes pulled him backward, pressing his spine flat against the table. The straps creaked, buckles snapped tight, his arms spread, legs bound, a rag of cloth placed under his head. His crown lay abandoned on the stone behind him. Then the first tool was lifted, and the city watched. The blade wasn't sharpened for speed. It was short, thick, curved, meant to tear, not slice. The executioner didn't wear a mask. He didn't need to. He was only a man, doing what many believed they would have done themselves if given the chance. The crowd pressed forward, but no one shouted. No one laughed. The silence held. Only breath, the rustle of cloaks, the creak of wood beneath bound limbs. The first cut went to the right hand. The king didn't scream. He inhaled sharp, a hiss between clenched teeth. Blood ran across the table like ink across old parchment. The fingers twitched, separated one by one. The crowd flinched, but no one turned away. Some gripped each other's sleeves. Others just stared, unmoving. The second hand was slower. Bone cracked. The wrist dislocated before the blade even touched it. It wasn't performance. It was process. Deliberate, methodical. With each motion, the executioner worked in silence, like a craftsman finishing a dark commission. The king began to shake, not in fear, but from the cold, the blood loss, the tremors of his own body no longer listening to command. His eyes never closed. He stared up, not at the sky, but into nothing. Next, the feet. Straps had to be tightened again. The left ankle snapped before the flesh was cut. The tendons in the right curled like twisted ropes as the blade worked through them. The king's breath became ragged, like an animal drowning. Still no screams, only a sound deep in his throat, somewhere between a growl and a sob. Not pain, not surrender, just something raw. Human, stripped. The crowd held its breath when the final tool was lifted. Long, thin, iron. It was for the tongue. Someone in the back turned away then. A woman. She couldn't watch, but most still did. The blade entered his mouth slowly. He bit down once. Reflex. The executioner didn't stop. Blood spilled from his lips as the metal hooked. There was a sound then. Not a scream, but a gurgle that stopped halfway. And then it was done. He lay still, but he was still alive. His eyes blinked, slow and uneven. The blood had stopped pulsing. Now it only leaked, thick and dark, from the corners of his mouth, from the stump of his wrist, from where his legs no longer held weight. His chest still rose, but barely. The straps didn't need to hold him anymore. His body wasn't going anywhere. The man from the platform stepped closer. He didn't look at the wounds. He looked at the king's face. What was left of it? Eyes open, dull, distant. The face of a man who once commanded legions, now barely able to move his jaw. Not from pain, from the sheer collapse of everything that made him human. "We remember," the man said. That's all this was. He turned to the crowd. This city was ruled with fire, with hunger, with fear. Let him be the end of that. A murmur swept through the people. Not triumph, not celebration, just relief. Some wept, some held each other. Some looked away at last, like a page had been turned not in history, but in the spine of the city itself. The executioner stepped back. No final blow, no mercy. The king was left to die as he ruled, slowly, without compassion, beneath the open sky and the full gaze of the people he once broke. By nightfall, the body was still on the table. No one approached it. No one moved it. Crows circled, but did not land. A boy lit a candle and placed it at the base of the platform. By morning, the platform was gone. Burned. Ash scattered to the wind. No grave. No monument. Only silence where fear once stood. And somewhere in the stones, under soot and old blood, 12 names remained. Carved not by hand, but by what came after.